On January 21st, 2017, the day after President Trump took office, almost 500,000 people participated in the Women's March on Washington. They were joined by millions more in cities across the country and around the globe. The organizers of the march sought to create a nonviolent event and movement that would advocate for a society in which women, including Black women, Native women, poor women, immigrant women, disabled women, Muslim women, lesbian, and trans women, are free and able to care for and nurture their families, however they are formed. I should note that although there had been some violence and destruction in Washington the previous day, the women's marches were peaceful. No arrests were made in Washington, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, or other major U.S. cities during the Women's March. My point here is not to reduce gender to women's issues, but to point to the considerable diversity and even polarization of perspectives that characterize gender rights and duties in the U.S. The organizers of the Women's March laid out 8 unity principles that they hoped would bind participants together. 1. Ending violence while dismantling gender and racial inequalities within the criminal justice system. 2. Reproductive rights, including access to safe, legal, affordable abortion and birth control, which of course remains a highly divisive issue in the U.S. LGBTQIA rights for lesbians, gays, bi, queer, trans, or gender non-conforming brothers, sisters, and siblings. 4. Workers' rights, including affordable child care, paid family leave, and equitable pay for women. 5. Civil rights, voting rights, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. 6. Disability rights. 7. Immigration rights regardless of status or country of origin. And 8. Environmental justice, the right to clean water, clean air, access to enjoyment of public lands, and protection of this environment and climate. Hey, wait just a minute. Of course, not everyone, including many women, agreed with the Women's Marchers' goals, principles, or tactics. Columnist David Brooks argued that the march had focused on the wrong issues. Reproductive rights, equal pay, affordable health care, and action on climate change are important issues, especially to many upper-middle-class voters in university towns and coastal cities, Brooks wrote. But to Brooks, the Women's March was mired in identity politics and who is most oppressed and who should get pride of place, while it ignored matters of importance to the blue states of the post-industrial Midwest and the heartland. For Brooks, crucial problems in the main arena of national life included how technology and globalization are decimating jobs and tearing the social fabric, and the way migration is redefining nation-states, and how to rebind a functioning polity and modernize a binding American idea. As Brooks put it, the movement could have offered a red, white, and blue alternative, a modern, forward-looking patriotism based on pluralism, dynamism, growth, racial and gender equality, and global engagement. Brooks also cited a November 2016 New York Times op-ed piece by Professor Mark Lila. It argued, the fixation of diversity in our schools and in the press has produced a generation of liberals and progressive narcissistically unaware of conditions outside their self-defined groups and indifferent to the task of reaching out to Americans in every walk of life. Supporters of the Women's March and the issues it raised found Brooks's critique condescending and sarcastically thanked him for mansplaining. They saw the march as a first step in mobilizing time, energy, and resources of women and men across the United States to engage the hearts as well as the minds of our compatriots. The study of gender, that is, the characteristics usually associated with being a man or a woman in a particular culture, and the way those characteristics intersect with dynamics of power, is critical to anthropology. Gender studies within anthropology is the field of research that investigates who we are as men and women. It investigates how gender categories intersect with other aspects of human culture, such as sexuality, health, family, religion, economics, politics, sports, and more. It's easy to think of gender as a binary issue, masculine versus feminine, but there's much more to it than that. Are men and women born or made? How is gender culturally constructed? How do anthropologists explore the relationship between gender and power? And how is globalization transforming gender roles and stratification? Are men and women born or made? We are accustomed to thinking that men and women have inherent or innate natures. We want to explore how much of these roles are constructed, that is, cultural, versus how much they are truly biological. How do we define sex and gender? From a biological perspective, sex is determined by three primary factors: genitalia, the external sexual organs within a species; gonads, the internal sexual organs that produce different sets of hormones, testes in males, ovaries in females; chromosome patterns. Human females have 2 X chromosomes. Human males have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome. We tend to think of sex as binary, made up of 2 discrete categories, male and female. Differences may occur in any of these 3 primary factors that don't fit into binary categories. Humans also exhibit secondary sexual characteristics, such as differences in average height, weight, and strength. Males tend to be taller and have a larger build than females. Females have less body hair and a higher pitch of voice. But secondary sex characteristics are also far from binary. Rather, they exhibit large ranges of variation. While men do tend to be taller than women, there are plenty of tall women and short men. In all human societies, males and females have expected cultural roles. Anthropologists who study gender roles cross-culturally discover that these roles are not universal. Gender roles are also subject to change. Today, women in Western culture fill roles for which they were previously assumed incapable. These roles include everything from military combat to powerful political and economic roles. The anthropological study of gender roles suggests there is significant fluidity between true biological difference and cultural construction. Modern anthropology holds that gender is a cultural construct. As children grow up, they learn what kinds of behavior are perceived as masculine and feminine. We give our children gendered names. We dress them differently, cut their hair differently, and paint their rooms different colors, for example. Frequently, male and female children are encouraged to participate in different kinds of activities. All of these experiences encourage children to view gender the way their parents view it. Thus, gender roles become a self-reinforcing cultural norm. Anthropologists have become increasingly interested in studying gender, particularly focusing on the ways in which gendered behavior affects the rest of our lives. In the U.S., many children are enrolled in youth and sports leagues, baseball, soccer, volleyball, and others. Frequently, but less so than in the past, these sports are typically sexually segregated. Some sports are simply considered gendered. American football is generally played by boys, but one of my colleagues played in a women's league and wrote her dissertation on the experience. Volleyball, especially at the youth level, is almost exclusively played by girls, but anthropologists question how much of this perceived difference arises from cultural norms rather than biological differences. In 1996, anthropologists Landers and Fine published a study of gendered behavior in a children's t-ball league that included both boys and girls. They found that the adults, both coaches and parents, treated the boys and girls differently. Their study suggests that many attributes we consider masculine, such as competitive drive and athleticism, are taught to children and are not simply biological. Although gender studies have long been associated with studying women, males learn gender just as females do. C.J. Pascoe studied the construction of masculinity in a California high school. In the U.S., construction of gender roles is heightened during adolescence. Pascoe found that male students actively work to express and demonstrate masculinity. In particular, she identified what she called fag discourse. Discourse refers to a pattern of communication. Male students teased, bullied, and harassed each other. Male students would be called fags if they were not sufficiently masculine. Pascoe found that this was not tied to sexual orientation. Gay male students were not called fags if they exhibited masculine behavior, but straight students were called fags if they failed to exhibit masculine behavior. Through peer pressure, masculinity was encouraged among male students. Anthropologists hold that gender is not fixed, but rather an identity that is actively expressed. People make choices in their behavior, and those choices include how they express their gender identity. Men who publicly proclaimed certain characteristics as not masculine or even feminine would then exhibit similar characteristics in private. Pictured here is Monet Davis, an exceptionally gifted athlete who pitched a shutout in the Little League World Series and who plays point guard on a boys' basketball team. She hopes to play Division I college basketball.